Maggie Sullivan fell to her knees in the snow, and she did not get up. Her son Billy grabbed her coat with both hands, pulling, crying, begging. "Mama, please. Mama, you gotta stand. Please, Mama." But her leg had given out. The cold had taken everything else, their home, their hope, their future, and now it was taking her body too. 7-year-old Billy looked down the empty road, tears freezing on his cheeks. Then he saw a man on horseback watching from the ridge, and Billy Sullivan did the only thing he could. He ran toward a stranger and screamed for help. If you enjoy stories of hope, survival, and love found in the darkest places, please subscribe to our channel and stay with us until the very end. Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. Montana Territory, December 1879. The wind cut through Maggie Sullivan's coat like it wasn't there at all. She had been walking since before dawn. 5 miles behind her lay the farm that used to be hers. Somewhere ahead lay Bozeman, where a cousin she hadn't seen in 12 years might still live. Might. That word had become her whole life now. Might find shelter. Might find work. Might survive another day. Billy walked beside her, his small hand gripping the flour sack that held everything they owned. He hadn't complained once, not when his boots soaked through, not when his lips turned blue, not when the snow started falling so thick they could barely see the road. He was 7 years old, and he had already learned that complaining changed nothing. "Mama," he said quietly, "how much farther?" Maggie's right knee screamed with every step. The old injury, a fall from a wagon 3 years back, had never healed right. Cold made it worse. This cold made it impossible. "Not far, sweetheart," she lied. "Just a little more." Billy nodded. He knew she was lying. He didn't say so. They walked another 100 yards. Then Maggie's knee buckled. She went down hard, both hands slamming into the snow. The impact jarred through her whole body. She tried to push herself up, but her leg wouldn't hold. "Mama!" Billy dropped the sack and grabbed her arm. "Mama, get up." "I'm trying, baby." Her voice came out thin and strange. "Just give me a minute." She tried again. Her knee folded like wet paper. "Mama." "Billy, I need you to listen to me." Maggie grabbed his coat and pulled him close. Her fingers were shaking. "I need you to be brave now. Can you do that?" His chin trembled. "I'm scared." "I know. I'm scared too." She brushed snow from his hair. "But we're gonna be all right. We just need to rest for a minute." "We can't rest here, Mama. You said so. You said if we stop moving." "I know what I said." "You said we'd freeze." Maggie closed her eyes. The wind howled around them, and she thought about Patrick, her husband. Dead 8 months now, buried in a mine collapse that took 6 other men too. She thought about how he used to carry Billy on his shoulders, how he used to sing Irish songs when he was drunk, how he used to tell her everything would work out. "Everything will work out, Maggie girl. You'll see." Nothing had worked out. The bank took the farm. The neighbors turned their backs. The preacher's wife said it was God's punishment for Patrick's drinking. And now Maggie was going to die in the snow, and her son was going to watch. "Mama," Billy's voice had changed. "Mama, there's someone." Maggie opened her eyes. A figure sat on horseback at the top of the ridge, maybe 200 yards away, just sitting there watching. The snow made it hard to see details, but she could make out a dark coat, a wide-brimmed hat. "Mama, should I?" "Stay here." "But maybe he can help." "Billy, stay here." But Billy was already moving. He was running through the snow arms, pumping boots, slipping, running toward the stranger on the ridge. "Billy, Billy, come back." Maggie tried to stand. Her knee screamed. She fell again. "Billy." The boy ran. Josiah Callahan had been watching for almost a minute before the boy spotted him. He'd seen them from a distance, 2 shapes struggling through the drifts. He'd almost turned his horse the other way. Wasn't his business. wasn't his problem. But then the woman fell, and she didn't get up. Now the boy was running toward him, a small figure in a coat 2 sizes too big, and Josiah could hear him screaming even through the wind. "Please, please help, my mama can't walk. Please." Josiah didn't move. The boy reached him, grabbed the horse's bridle with both hands. His face was red and wet with tears and snot. He couldn't have been more than 7. "Please, mister. Please. She fell down and she can't get up. Please help her. Please." Josiah looked down at the boy. He looked back at the woman in the snow. He thought about Sarah, about Emma, about the 2 graves behind his cabin that he hadn't visited in 3 years because looking at them made him want to put a bullet in his own head. "Please?" the boy whispered. "She's my mama." Josiah's jaw tightened. He kicked his horse forward. Maggie heard the hoofbeats before she saw him. She was still on her knees in the snow, hands braced against the ground, trying to keep from falling over completely. The cold had seeped through her dress, her coat, her skin. She couldn't feel her feet anymore. Then a shadow fell over her. She looked up. The man was tall, even sitting in the saddle. Dark coat, dark hat, dark beard shot through with gray. His face was weathered and hard, the kind of face that had seen too much and decided not to care anymore. Billy stood beside the horse, still gripping the bridle. "This is my mama. Her name's Maggie. She hurt her leg. Please help her, mister." The man said nothing. Maggie forced herself to speak. "I'm sorry. My son shouldn't have bothered you. We'll be fine. We just need—" "You won't be fine." His voice was low and rough, like he didn't use it much. "Ma'am, you're 3 miles from town. Storm's getting worse. You stay out here another hour, you'll both be dead." Maggie's throat tightened. "I can walk. I just need a minute." "No, you can't." He swung down from the saddle. "Your boy already told me. Your leg gave out. It's an old injury. It flares up sometimes. It flared up in the middle of a blizzard, 3 miles from anywhere." He stopped in front of her, hands on his hips. "You got a plan for that?" Maggie stared at him. She had no plan. She had nothing. No money, no food, no shelter, no hope. "That's what I thought." He crouched down, bringing his face level with hers. "I got a cabin about a 1/4 mile east. It ain't much, but it's warm. You can stay until the storm passes." We can't impose." "Ain't an imposition, it's survival." He straightened up. "Now can you stand if I help you, or do I need to carry you?" Billy tugged at his sleeve. "You gotta carry her, mister. She tried to stand 3 times. She can't." The man looked at the boy. Something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been pain. "All right then," he said quietly. "I'll carry her." Maggie didn't remember much of the ride. She remembered his arms lifting her, surprisingly gentle for how rough he looked. She remembered the warmth of the horse beneath her, the scratch of his coat against her cheek. She remembered Billy walking beside them, one hand on her ankle, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. The cabin emerged from the snow like a dream. It was small, 1 room from the look of it, with smoke curling from a stone chimney. A lean-to stable sat beside it, and through the swirling snow she could see split wood stacked against the wall. The man dismounted, then lifted her down. She gasped when his hands touched her injured leg. "Sorry," he muttered. "Gotta get you inside." He carried her through the door. The warmth hit her like a wall. The cabin was simple but clean. A bed against one wall, a table with 2 chairs, a fireplace with a kettle hanging over the flames. Everything had a place. Everything was orderly. He set her on the bed, then stepped back. Billy rushed in behind them, still clutching the flour sack. He dropped it and ran to Maggie's side. "Mama! Mama, are you okay?" "I'm okay, baby." She touched his face. "I'm okay." The man was already at the fireplace, adding wood to the flames. He didn't look at them. "Name's Callahan," he said over his shoulder. "Josiah Callahan. Most folks call me Joe. You can call me whatever you want, long as you don't call me late for supper." Billy almost smiled. Almost. Maggie watched the man Joe as he moved around the cabin. He filled a pot with water, set it to heat, pulled a wool blanket from a chest and handed it to Billy without a word. Found a cloth wet, it came back to the bed. "Let me see that leg." Maggie hesitated. "Ma'am, I ain't gonna hurt you, but I need to see what we're dealing with." Slowly she pulled up her skirt, revealing the knee beneath. It was swollen purple-red against her pale skin. Joe sucked air through his teeth. "That's been bad for a while. 3 years. I fell off a wagon. And it never healed right. We couldn't afford a doctor." He grunted, pressed the warm cloth against the swelling. Maggie hissed, but she didn't pull away. Billy watched from beside her. "Is my mama gonna be okay?" Joe glanced at him. "She'll be fine. Just needs rest and warmth. 2 things this cabin's got plenty of." "What about you?" "What about me? Where are you gonna sleep?" Joe's mouth twitched. "I reckon I'll figure something out." He stood, tossed the cloth into the pot. "You 2 hungry?" Billy's stomach answered before he could. A loud growl that echoed through the cabin. "I'll take that as a yes." Joe moved to the shelf, pulled down a tin of beans, a loaf of bread. "Ain't fancy, but it's hot." "We can't take your food," Maggie said. "You can't not take it. Look at the boy. He's half starved." "We have—" She stopped. They had nothing. The flour sack held clothes, a Bible, a photograph of Patrick. No food. They'd eaten the last of the hardtack yesterday. "That's what I thought." Joe started slicing bread. "Don't worry about it, ma'am. I got plenty." "My name's Maggie. Maggie Sullivan." He paused, knife hovering over the loaf. "Sullivan. Irish?" "My husband was." "Was?" Maggie's throat tightened. "He died 8 months ago." Joe nodded slowly. "I'm sorry for your loss." Something in his voice told her he understood. Really understood. Not just the polite sympathy of strangers, but the deep knowing of someone who had buried their own. "What about you?" she asked quietly. "You live out here alone." "I do now." He didn't elaborate. She didn't push. They ate in silence. Billy sat at the table, shoveling beans into his mouth like he'd never see food again. Maggie ate more slowly, her eyes on Joe. He sat across from them, barely touching his own plate, watching the fire like it held answers to questions he'd stopped asking. "This is really good," Billy said through a mouthful. "Don't talk with your mouth full," Maggie murmured automatically. "Sorry, Mama." He swallowed. "But it is. Really good." Joe's mouth twitched again, that almost smile that never quite landed. "Glad you like it. There's more if you want." "Can I have more?" "Billy." "Let him eat, ma'am. Growing boy needs food." Joe stood, refilled Billy's plate. "How old are you, son?" "7. But I'll be 8 in March." "8. That's a good age." "How old are you?" "Billy." Maggie's face reddened. "You can't just ask people." "It's all right." Joe sat back down. "I'm 42, though some days I feel about 100. "That's really old." "Billy," but Joe actually laughed. A short, rusty sound like a door that hadn't been opened in years. "He ain't wrong." Billy grinned. It was the first time he'd smiled in days. The storm grew worse as night fell. Wind howled against the walls, rattling the shutters, screaming down the chimney. Snow piled higher against the windows. The world outside disappeared into white. Inside, the cabin held steady. Joe had given Maggie the bed, insisted on it despite her protests. He made a pallet by the fire for himself, another one for Billy between them. The boy fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted beyond his 7 years. Maggie couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark, listening to the storm, watching the firelight flicker on the ceiling. Her leg throbbed, but the pain had eased to something bearable. The warmth had seeped into her bones, chasing away the cold that had lived there for days. "You should rest." Joe's voice came from the darkness by the fire. Quiet, not unkind. I can't, she admitted. Too much in my head. Yeah, I know how that goes. Silence stretched between them, comfortable somehow. Can I ask you something? Maggie said. You can ask, don't mean I'll answer. Why did you help us? You could have ridden by, most people would have. Joe was quiet for a long moment. I almost did, he finally said. Ride by, I mean. Told myself it wasn't my business. What changed your mind? Another long pause. Your boy. The way he ran toward me. The way he screamed for help. Joe's voice grew rough. I had a daughter once. She used to run like that. Like the whole world was something to race toward instead of run from. Maggie's chest tightened. Had diphtheria. 7 years ago. Took her and her mama both. 3 days apart. Oh God, I'm so sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. But his voice said it wasn't. His voice said it was yesterday, and the day before, and every day since. What were their names? Maggie asked softly. Sarah, my wife, and Emma, my little girl. He cleared his throat. Emma was 4. Same color hair as your boy. Red like sunset. Billy got that from his father. Patrick had the reddest hair I ever saw. The mind collapse. That how he went. How did you know? Heard about it. 6 men wasn't it down in the Helena operation? 7. They didn't find the last one for 2 weeks. Maggie's voice wavered. Patrick wasn't even supposed to be there. He was a farmer. But we needed money and the mine was paying. She couldn't finish. You don't gotta explain, Joe said. Man does what he has to, provides for his family. And then he dies, and his family has nothing. Bitterness crept into her voice. The bank took everything. The farm, the equipment, even the livestock. Said we owed more than it was all worth. I had 2 weeks to get out. And nobody helped you. Nobody wanted to. The preacher's wife said Patrick's death was God's punishment. Said he drank too much, swore too much, didn't go to church enough. Said I was being punished for marrying a man like that. Joe's voice hardened. That's horse shit. Maybe, but it's what they believe. Maggie stared at the ceiling. So we left. I thought maybe my cousin in Bozeman, but I don't even know if she still lives there. I don't know if she'd take us in even if she did. I don't know anything anymore. You know how to keep walking when your body tells you to stop. That ain't nothing. It wasn't enough. If you hadn't come. But I did. Why though? Why does a man who lives alone in the middle of nowhere stop for a stranger? Joe didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was barely a whisper. Because my Emma used to run toward people, not away. Because she believed everybody was good, that everybody would help if you just asked. And she was wrong. The world ain't like that. But maybe... He stopped. Started again. Maybe I wanted to be the kind of man she thought I was. Just once. Maggie felt tears sliding down her temples, soaking into the pillow. She sounds like she was wonderful. She was. They both were. Joe shifted on his pallet. You should sleep now, ma'am. Storm's gonna last at least another day, maybe more. Maggie. What? My name's Maggie. You saved my life, Mr. Callahan. You can use my name. Another long silence. All right then, Maggie. His voice was softer now. Get some sleep. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. The next morning, Billy woke first. He sat up on his pallet blanket falling away, and found Joe already at the stove stirring something in a pot. The smell of coffee filled the cabin. Morning, Joe said without turning around. Morning. Billy rubbed his eyes. Is Mama okay? She's still sleeping. Let her rest. Billy nodded and padded over to the window. He pushed aside the shutter and stared at the wall of white outside. Holy cow. Language. Sorry, but holy cow. Joe actually smiled. A real one this time. Yeah, That's a lot of snow. Are we stuck? For a while. Day or two, maybe more. Billy thought about this. What do you do when you're stuck? Same thing I always do. Take care of the horse. Keep the fire going. Wait it out. Can I help? Joe turned to look at him. The boy was skinny, red-haired, with his mother's gray-blue eyes. He stood with his shoulders squared, trying to look bigger than he was. You ever taken care of a horse before? No, sir, but I can learn. Something in Joe's chest twisted. A memory, Emma asking if she could help feed the chickens. Her small hands reaching for the feed bucket. All right then, he said quietly. Get your boots on. I'll show you. They trudged to the lean-to stable through snow that came up to Billy's waist. Joe had to half-carry him the last few yards. Inside, a brown mare stood in a makeshift stall, breath steaming in the cold. This is Molly, Joe said. Had her about 6 years now. Billy reached up carefully, let the horse sniff his hand. She's pretty. She's temperamental, but she's tough. Saved my hide more than once. How? Carried me home when I was too drunk to ride. Found her way through a blizzard once when I couldn't see 2 feet in front of me. She's smarter than most people I know. Billy stroked Molly's nose. I never had a horse. We had a mule named Biscuit, but the bank took him. The bank took your mule. They took everything. Billy's voice was matter-of-fact. Too matter-of-fact for a 7-year-old. Mama cried when they took Biscuit. She tried not to let me see, but I saw. Joe's jaw tightened. Your mama's been through a lot. She's strong. She doesn't look strong, but she is. She carried me on her back for 2 miles when I got sick last month. She didn't even stop to rest. Sounds like her. Billy looked up at Joe. Are you strong? Strong enough, I reckon. Strong enough to help my mama. Joe met the boy's eyes. There was something in them, something fierce and protective and desperate. I aim to try, Joe said quietly. Billy nodded, satisfied. Good. Because she needs help. She won't ask for it. She never asks. But she needs it. How do you know? Because she cries at night when she thinks I'm sleeping. And she talks to my daddy like he's still there. And sometimes she looks at me like... Billy's voice wavered. Like she's scared she's gonna lose me too. Joe crouched down, bringing himself to the boy's level. Listen to me, son. Your mama's not gonna lose you. And you ain't gonna lose her. Not if I got anything to say about it. You promise? I don't make promises I can't keep. But I'll do everything I can. That's the best I got. Billy considered this. Then he stuck out his hand. Deal. Joe looked at the small hand. Remembered Emma's hands, always reaching, always trusting. He shook it. Deal. When they got back inside, Maggie was awake. She sat on the edge of the bed, testing her weight on her injured leg. The swelling had gone down overnight, but she winced when she tried to stand. Mama? Billy ran to her. We fed the horse. Her name's Molly. You went outside. Maggie's eyes shot to Joe. In this storm. Just to the stable, Joe said. Boy wanted to help. Figured it couldn't hurt. He could have frozen. He was fine. I kept an eye on him. Maggie's mouth thinned. For a moment she looked like she wanted to argue. Then she sighed. Thank you for letting him help. He's a good kid. Works hard. He is. Maggie pulled Billy close. He's the best thing I ever did. Mama. Billy squirmed, embarrassed. It's true. Joe turned back to the stove. Breakfast's almost ready. Oatmeal. Hope that's all right. It's more than all right. Maggie tried to stand again. Stay put. I'll bring it to you. You can rest that leg. Doctor's orders. You're not a doctor. No, but I've set enough bones and stitched enough cuts to know when someone needs to stay off their feet. He ladled oatmeal into 3 bowls. You push that leg too hard, you'll be stuck here all winter. That what you want? Maggie's jaw set, but she stayed on the bed. The day passed slowly. Joe showed Billy how to whittle, carving a rough horse shape from a piece of pine. Billy watched every movement with intense concentration, then tried it himself. His first attempt looked more like a lumpy dog, but he didn't give up. Maggie watched them from the bed, watched how patient Joe was with the boy, how he guided Billy's hands without taking over, how he praised small successes and shrugged off failures. Patrick had never been patient like that. He'd loved Billy fiercely, but he'd expected too much too fast. Got frustrated when the boy didn't understand something immediately. This was different. This was gentle. "You're good with him," Maggie said quietly when Billy went to the window to check on the storm. Joe shrugged. "He's easy to be good with." "Not everyone would think so. Not everyone's worth thinking about." Maggie studied his profile. The hard lines of his face softened somehow when he looked at Billy. The gray in his beard. The sadness in his eyes that never quite went away. "Can I ask you something else? You're full of questions, ain't you?" "I'm curious. It's a flaw." "Ain't a flaw. Curiosity keeps people alive." He set down his whittling. "What do you want to know? Why do you live out here alone? A man like you could work in town, have neighbors, friends." Joe's face closed off. "Had all that once. Didn't work out." "What happened?" "People happened. After Sarah and Emma died, folks were kind for a while, brought food, said prayers, all that. But then they started talking. Said I should move on, find another wife, have more children, like Sarah and Emma were just—" His voice hardened. "Like they were replaceable. That's horrible. That's people. They don't understand grief that doesn't end, so they push. They judge. They whisper behind your back about how you're wasting your life, how you need to get over it, how God has a plan." He spat the last words like poison. "I got tired of it. So I came out here, built this cabin, stopped pretending." "Stopped pretending what?" "That I was ever going to be okay again." The words hung in the air between them. Maggie understood. She understood more than she wanted to admit. "I know that feeling," she said softly. "The pretending. After Patrick died, everyone kept telling me to be strong for Billy, to keep going, to trust in God's plan. But all I wanted to do was lie down and never get up again." "What stopped you?" "Billy. He needed me. I couldn't leave him alone." "That's more than a lot of people manage." "It's not strength. It's just—" She searched for the word. "Stubbornness. Too stubborn to quit." Joe's mouth curved slightly. "Stubbornness'll keep you alive longer than strength ever will." Billy ran back from the window. "It's still snowing, Joe. How long do blizzards last?" "Long as they want. This one might go another day or two. So we have to stay." "Looks like it." Billy grinned. "Good. I'm not done learning to whittle." That night, after Billy fell asleep, Maggie and Joe talked again. This time, the conversation wandered. They talked about small things, favorite foods, places they'd been, stories from childhood. Maggie learned that Joe had grown up in Ohio, come west at 18, looking for adventure. He'd found it along with hardship loss and eventually a woman named Sarah, who made him want to stop wandering. Joe learned that Maggie had been a teacher before she married Patrick, that she missed books more than almost anything, that she'd wanted to go to college once, but her father said education was wasted on women. "That's horseshit too," Joe said. Maggie laughed. A real laugh surprised out of her. "You say that a lot." "Say what?" "Horseshit. Because there's a lot of it in the world." He poked at the fire. "Your father was wrong. Education ain't wasted on anyone." "Well, it doesn't matter now. College isn't exactly an option when you're a homeless widow with a 7-year-old. Things change. Options open up. You sound like Patrick. He was always saying things would get better." "Did they? For a while?" Maggie pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Then they got worse." "And now?" Maggie looked at him. At the fire behind him, the snow outside the small cabin, that had become an unlikely shelter from the storm. "Now, I don't know," she admitted. "But today was better than yesterday. That's something." "That's everything." Joe stood stretched. "Get some sleep, Maggie. Tomorrow might be better still." She watched him settle onto his pallet by the fire. "Joe, yeah, thank you for everything." He was quiet for a moment. "You already thanked me." "I know, but I mean it. Not just for the food and the shelter. She struggled to find the words. "For not making me feel like a burden. For letting Billy help. For talking to me like I'm a person, not a charity case." Joe propped himself up on one elbow. In the firelight, his face was all shadows and angles. "You ain't a burden," he said quietly. "And you ain't charity. You're just someone who needed help. Same as everyone does sooner or later." "Did you need help?" "Still do. Every damn day." "Then maybe," Maggie took a breath, "maybe we can help each other." The words hung there. Joe didn't answer, but he didn't look away either. The storm raged for 3 more days. Each morning, Joe and Billy went to feed Molly. Each afternoon, they whittled by the fire. Each evening, Maggie and Joe talked while Billy slept. Maggie's leg improved slowly. By the 3rd day, she could stand with only a little pain. By the 4th, she could walk from the bed to the table without help. But she wasn't in a hurry to leave. Neither, it seemed, was Billy. The boy had attached himself to Joe like a shadow. He followed him everywhere, asked endless questions, absorbed every answer. When Joe fixed a loose board on the stable, Billy held the nails. When Joe sharpened his axe, Billy watched like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. "You've got an admirer," Maggie said one afternoon while Billy napped. Joe grunted. "He's just bored." "No, he's not. He's looking for—" She stopped. "For what?" "A father. Someone to teach him things. Someone to look up to." Joe's hands stilled on the wood he was carving. "I ain't." "I know. I'm not asking you to be. But you should know what he sees when he looks at you." "What does he see?" "Someone strong. Someone kind. Someone who keeps his promises." Joe set down his knife. "I told him I don't make promises." "But you kept the one you did make. You said you'd do everything you could, and you have." Joe didn't answer. But when Billy woke up, he let the boy sit beside him at the fire. And when Billy's rough-carved horse finally looked like a horse, Joe smiled. A real smile. The first one Maggie had seen reach his eyes. On the 5th morning, the storm finally broke. Maggie woke to silence. No wind, no rattling shutters, just stillness. She limped to the window and pushed the shutter open. The world was white. Pure blinding white under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Snow lay in great drifts against the cabin walls, sparkling in the morning sun. "Mama?" Billy ran to join her. It stopped. It stopped. Joe came up behind them. He stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "Roads'll take a day or 2 to clear," he said. "But you could probably make it to town now if you wanted." If you wanted. Maggie heard what he wasn't saying. She turned to look at him. "What if I didn't want to?" "Not yet, anyway." Joe's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Then I reckon you could stay, long as you needed." "What about what you need?" "I need—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I need to stop living like I'm already dead. And having you two here—" Another swallow. "It's been good. Having someone to talk to. Having the boy around. Billy adores you. And I—" Joe looked down at the boy who was trying to push the window shutter wider. "I adore him too." "Mama." Billy tugged at her sleeve. "Can we stay? Please, I want to learn more whittling. And Joe said he'd teach me to ride Molly when my legs are long enough. And—" "Slow down, sweetheart." "But can we stay?" Maggie looked at her son. At Joe. At the cabin that had saved their lives. "We can stay?" she said softly. For a while. Billy whooped and threw his arms around Joe's waist. Joe stood frozen for a moment. Then slowly his hand came to rest on the boy's head. And Maggie saw something she hadn't seen in days. Hope. Real hope. For the first time since Patrick died. The first week passed like a held breath. Maggie found herself falling into the rhythm of the cabin without meaning to. She woke when Joe woke, helped with breakfast, while Billy fed Molly spent afternoons mending clothes or reading the 2 worn books Joe kept on his shelf. Evenings belonged to conversation, to the crackle of fire, to something that felt dangerously close to peace. But peace, she had learned, never lasted. We need supplies, Joe said on the 7th morning. Running low on flour, coffee too. Billy looked up from his whittling. Can I come? It's a long ride to town. I don't mind. Please, Joe. Please. Joe glanced at Maggie. She nodded slightly. All right, but you ride with me, and you do what I say when I say it. Understood? Yes, sir. Maggie stood slowly testing her leg. The swelling had gone down considerably, but a deep ache remained. I should come too. I need to. You need to rest that knee. I've been resting for a week. I'm going crazy. Crazy's better than crippled. Joe. She met his eyes. I need to come. I need to know if my cousin's still in Bozeman. I need to send word at least. Joe's jaw tightened. He looked like he wanted to argue. He didn't. Fine. But if that leg gives out, you tell me. No pretending. I don't pretend. You do nothing but pretend. You've been pretending since I found you. The words hit harder than he meant them to. Maggie flinched. I'm sorry, Joe said immediately. That came out wrong. No, it came out right. Maggie pulled on her coat. Let's go. The ride to town took 2 hours. Billy sat in front of Joe on Molly, chattering the whole way about horses and whittling and the rabbit tracks they passed in the snow. Joe answered in his usual short sentences, but Maggie noticed how he leaned down to hear the boy better, how his hand stayed steady on Billy's shoulder. She rode the mule Joe had produced from somewhere, borrowed him from a neighbor, he'd said, which meant he had neighbors, which meant he wasn't as isolated as he'd claimed. Questions for later. The town of Miller's Creek appeared around a bend in the road. It was small, maybe 50 buildings, a main street of hard-packed dirt, now covered in snow, a church steeple rising above everything else. People moved between buildings, bundled against the cold. Maggie felt her stomach tighten. You all right? Joe asked. Fine. Maggie. I said I'm fine. They rode into town. Heads turned as they passed. Maggie felt eyes on her, curious, suspicious judging. A woman in a blue bonnet whispered to her companion. A man in a leather apron stopped sweeping his porch to stare. Joe seemed not to notice. Or maybe he was just used to it. They stopped in front of the general store. Joe dismounted, then lifted Billy down. When he turned to help Maggie, she was already sliding off the mule, wincing as her bad leg took her weight. Stubborn, Joe muttered. You said that already. Bears repeating. The store was warm inside, smelling of coffee and tobacco and dried meat. A man stood behind the counter, thin, balding, with spectacles perched on his nose. He looked up when they entered. His face changed. Callahan. The word came out flat, unfriendly. Hendricks. Joe's voice matched. Need some supplies. I can see that. Hendricks's eyes slid to Maggie, then to Billy. Who's this? Guests of mine. Guests? Hendricks's mouth twisted. Didn't know you took guests. Didn't know it was your business. The air between them crackled. Billy pressed closer to Maggie's side. Mama, he whispered. That man's mean. Hush, sweetheart. Hendricks heard. His eyes narrowed. Mama, is it? So, you've got yourself a woman now. Callahan. Moving on from Sarah so quick? Joe went still. Completely dangerously still. What did you say? I said, I heard what you said. Joe's voice dropped to something quiet and deadly. Now I'm giving you a chance to unsay it. Hendricks's face paled, but he didn't back down. It's been 7 years. Whole town's been saying you needed to move on. Now you have. Nothing wrong with that. She ain't. Joe stopped. His hands were clenched at his sides. Just get me the damn supplies. Joe. Maggie touched his arm. Let's just go. No. He shook her off. We need supplies. He's got supplies. That's the end of it. Hendricks reached under the counter and pulled out a ledger. What do you need? Joe listed the items through clenched teeth. Flour, coffee, salt, sugar, ammunition. Hendricks wrote it all down, then named a price that made Maggie's eyes widen. That's twice what it's worth, she said before she could stop herself. Hendricks looked at her, really looked for the first time. Do I know you? No. You sure you look familiar? Maggie's heart hammered. I'm sure. Where you from? Back east. Back east where? Does it matter? Hendricks smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Just making conversation, ma'am. We don't get many strangers this time of year, especially not strangers traveling with young boys in the middle of winter. Joe stepped forward. Her business is her business, not yours, not anyone's. Now give me my supplies and we'll be on our way. Fine, fine. Hendricks held up his hands. No need to get riled. He gathered the supplies, taking his time watching them the whole while. When Joe paid the inflated price without argument, Hendricks leaned across the counter. You know, he said quietly. There was a man through here last week, asking about a woman and a boy. Said she owed money to some bank in Helena. Said there might be a reward for information. Maggie's blood turned to ice. That's so. Joe's voice was casual. Too casual. That's so. Red-haired boy, he said. Woman with a bad leg. Hendricks's eyes slid to Maggie. Ring any bells? Can't say it does. Hendricks straightened. Well, if you happen to meet anyone matching that description, you might want to let them know. Man said the bank's offering $50 for information leading to her whereabouts. $50 is a lot of money, Callahan. Lot of money. Joe grabbed the supplies. Let's go. They left the store in silence. Outside, the cold hit Maggie like a slap. She stumbled on the step and Joe caught her elbow. Easy. He knows. Her voice shook. He knows who I am. He suspects. That ain't the same thing. It's close enough. If he tells that man, he won't. You don't know that. I know Hendricks. He's a coward and a gossip, but he won't stick his neck out for $50. Too much risk, not enough reward. But, Maggie. Joe turned her to face him. His eyes were fierce. I told you I'd do everything I could. That means keeping you safe. You and the boy. You understand? Why? Why what? Why do you care so much? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Joe's jaw worked. For a moment, he looked like he was going to say something important, something that mattered. Then Billy tugged at his coat. Joe, can I have a peppermint? There's a candy store over there. The moment broke. Joe reached into his pocket, pulled out a coin. Get 2. 1 for your mama. Billy ran off, and Joe watched him go with something like pain in his eyes. He reminds me of her, he said quietly. Emma. The way he runs. The way he believes everything's going to be all right. Maybe it will be. Maybe. He didn't sound convinced. Come on, we should get back before dark. They collected Billy, bought the peppermints, and headed back to the horses. That's when Maggie saw him. A man standing across the street watching them. Tall, thin, wearing a black coat and a bowler hat. He had a face like a hatchet, all angles and edges, no softness anywhere. He was staring right at her. Joe. I see him. Is that? I don't know. Get on the mule, now. Maggie moved. Her legs screamed as she mounted, but she ignored it. Billy scrambled up in front of Joe, sensing the tension without understanding it. Mama, what's wrong? Nothing, sweetheart. We're just in a hurry. They rode out of town without looking back, but Maggie could feel the man's eyes on her the whole way. The cabin had never looked so welcoming. Joe helped Maggie down, then sent Billy to check on Molly. When the boy was out of earshot, he turned to her. Tell me everything. What go? The bank, the debt, the man looking for you. Tell me everything, Maggie. I can't help if I don't know what I'm dealing with. Maggie's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the porch step, the cold wood biting through her skirts. Her hands were shaking. Patrick borrowed money, she said. A lot of money. He said it was for equipment for seed for the farm. But I don't think... She stopped, swallowed. I don't think that's where it went. Where did it go? I don't know. After he died, the bank came. They said we owed $2,000. $2,000, Joe. I didn't even know you could borrow that much. You can, if you know the right people, or the wrong ones. They gave me 2 weeks to pay. I couldn't. So they took the farm, the livestock, everything. They said... Her voice cracked. They said if I couldn't pay the rest, they'd have me arrested. Debtor's prison. And Billy would go to the county home. Joe's face darkened. That ain't legal. Maybe not. But who's going to stop them? I'm a widow with no money and no family. They can do whatever they want. So you ran. I ran. I thought if I could get to Bozeman to my cousin, but now they're looking for me. They found me somehow. And if they take me, they won't. You can't promise that. I ain't promising nothing. Joe sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Nobody's taking you anywhere. Nobody's putting Billy in a county home, not while I'm breathing. Maggie looked at him. Why? Why do you care? Because it's the right thing to do. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I got. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Maggie asked the question she'd been afraid to ask. What happened in that store, Joe, with Hendricks? He said something about Sarah, about you moving on. Why did that make you so angry? Joe's whole body tensed. It ain't important. It is to me. Why? Because I'm living in your house. Because my son is following you around like you hung the moon. Because... She stopped herself. Because I need to know who you are. Joe stood abruptly, walked to the edge of the porch, stood with his back to her shoulders, rigid. Sarah didn't just die, he said finally. She was murdered. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. What? There was a man. Came through town looking for work. I hired him to help with the cattle. He seemed all right at first. Hard worker, kept to himself. Joe's voice had gone flat, dead. One night I was out checking the herd. Storm coming in, had to move them to lower ground. I was gone maybe 4 hours. He turned to face her. When I came back, the cabin was burning. Sarah was... His voice broke. She was already gone. Emma too. The doctor said it was smoke. Said they probably never woke up. Oh God. Joe... The man was gone. Took my strongbox, my rifle, one of my horses. Sheriff said it was robbery gone wrong. Said the fire was probably an accident. The man probably panicked. You don't believe that? No. Joe's eyes were like flint. I don't. I think he set that fire on purpose. I think he killed my family for $40 and a horse. Did they catch him? No, he disappeared. I spent 2 years looking for him. 2 years chasing rumors and dead ends. Never found him. And the town Hendricks. They think I'm crazy. Think I made it all up to avoid the truth. What truth? Joe's face contorted. That it was my fault. That I should have been there. That if I'd stayed home instead of chasing cattle in a storm, Sarah and Emma would still be alive. Maggie stood. Walked to him. Took his hands in hers. It wasn't your fault. You don't know that. I do. I know because I've told myself the same thing 1,000 times. If I'd stopped Patrick from going to the mine, if I'd been a better wife, if I'd prayed harder. She squeezed his hands. But it doesn't work that way, Joe. Bad things happen. People die. And the ones left behind, we just have to keep going. How? I don't know. One day at a time, I guess. 1 hour. 1 minute. And what if you can't? What if it's too hard? Then you find someone to help carry the weight. Joe looked at her. Really looked like he was seeing her for the first time. You're stronger than you know, he said quietly. So are you. They stood there in the cold hands clasped, breath mingling in the frosty air. Then Billy came running from the stable. Joe! Joe! Something's wrong with Molly. She won't eat. Joe pulled away. Show me. They went to the stable together. Maggie watched them go, the tall man and the small boy walking side by side into the gathering dark. And she made a decision. She wasn't going to run anymore. Whatever came next, she would face it. Here. With them. The next 3 days passed in a blur of routine. Molly turned out to have a minor colic. Nothing serious. But Joe stayed up through the night walking her, keeping her moving until she passed whatever had been troubling her stomach. Billy insisted on helping falling asleep against a hay bale around midnight. Joe carried him back to the cabin and laid him in bed without waking him. Maggie watched from the doorway. You're good with him, she said softly. He's a good kid. He is. But not everyone sees that. Their loss. Joe straightened, brushed hay from his coat. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped with fatigue. You should sleep, Maggie said. Can't. Gotta check on Molly in an hour. I'll do it. Your leg? Is fine. Better every day. She touched his arm. Let me help Joe. You've done everything for us. Let me do this one thing. He looked at her hand on his arm, looked at her face. All right, he said finally. Wake me if anything changes. I will. He walked past her into the cabin, then stopped. Maggie? Yes. Thank you. For what? For being here. He disappeared inside before she could respond. Maggie checked on Molly 3 times that night. The horse was fine munching hay contentedly, no signs of distress. But Maggie stayed in the stable anyway, sitting on a bale, listening to the quiet sounds of an animal at peace. She thought about Joe, about his wife and daughter, murdered for $40, about the guilt he carried like a stone around his neck. She thought about Patrick, about the money he'd borrowed, money she'd known nothing about the secrets he'd kept. What else had he hidden from her? And did it matter now? The stable door creaked open. Maggie jumped to her feet, heart pounding. It was Joe. Couldn't sleep, he said. Me neither. He sat down on the bale beside her. Close, their shoulders touched. I've been thinking, he said. About what? About what you said, about finding someone to help carry the weight. And I think maybe... He stopped, started again. I've been alone a long time, Maggie. Told myself I liked it that way. Told myself I didn't need anyone. But that was a lie. I was just scared. Scared of what? Of losing someone again. Of caring about someone and watching them die. His voice dropped. Of letting someone in and finding out I'm not worth letting in. Maggie turned to face him. In the dim lantern light, his face was all shadows and angles. You're worth it, she said quietly. More than you know. You don't. I do. I see how you are with Billy. How patient. How kind. I see how you took us in when you could have ridden by. How you're protecting us from whatever's coming. She reached up, touched his face. You're a good man, Joe Callahan. Whatever you think, whatever anyone else says, you're a good man. His hand came up to cover hers. Maggie. A noise outside. Hoofbeats. Coming fast. Joe was on his feet in an instant, pushing Maggie behind him. "Stay here." "Joe." "Stay here." He grabbed the pitchfork leaning against the wall and moved to the door. Maggie's heart pounded. She looked around for Billy, remembered he was in the cabin. The hoofbeats stopped. A voice called out, "Callahan, I know you're in there. Come out." Joe didn't move. "I said come out. I've got business with the woman." Maggie felt her blood turn to ice. Joe looked back at her. His face was hard, determined. "Don't move," he said. "Whatever happens, don't move." He pushed open the stable door and stepped outside. Maggie crept to the door, peering through the crack. She could see the man from town, the one in the black coat and bowler hat. He sat on a horse in front of the cabin, and he wasn't alone. 2 other men flanked him, both armed. "You're a hard man to track down, Callahan," the man said. "Especially in winter." "What do you want, Mr.?" "Name's Crawford. I work for First Montana Bank. I'm looking for a woman named Margaret Sullivan. Red hair, bad leg, traveling with a young boy. Don't know anyone by that name." "That's so." Crawford smiled. It was the smile of a snake. "Because Hendricks over in Miller's Creek says different. Says you rode into town with her just 3 days ago." "Hendricks talks too much." "Maybe. But he doesn't lie. Not when there's money involved." Crawford leaned forward in his saddle. "Here's the situation, Callahan. Mrs. Sullivan owes the bank $2,000. She ran rather than pay. That makes her a criminal. A fugitive. Debtor's prison ain't legal in Montana." "No, but fraud is still a crime. Patrick Sullivan borrowed that money under false pretenses. When he died, the debt transferred to his wife. She's responsible." "She didn't know about the debt." "Ignorance isn't a defense." Crawford's eyes swept the property. "Now I can make this easy or hard. You hand her over and I'll forget you were harboring a fugitive. You don't, and I'll burn this cabin to the ground with all of you inside." Joe's grip tightened on the pitchfork. "You're threatening me." "I'm stating facts. 3 men against 1. We've got guns. You've got a farm tool." Crawford shrugged. "The math ain't complicated." "Maybe not." Joe's voice was dangerously calm. "But you're forgetting something." "What's that?" "This is my land, and I don't take kindly to threats." He moved. Maggie didn't see exactly what happened next. One moment, Joe was standing still, the next, he'd hurled the pitchfork like a spear. It caught one of Crawford's men in the shoulder, knocking him from his horse with a scream. Chaos erupted. Gunshots cracked through the air. Joe dove behind the water trough as bullets splintered the wood above his head. Crawford shouted orders, his horse rearing. Maggie ran, not away toward the cabin, toward Billy. She burst through the door to find the boy sitting up in bed, eyes wide with terror. "Mama, what's happening? We have to go, now." "But Joe, he's buying us time. Come on." She grabbed Billy's hand, pulled him toward the back of the cabin. There had to be another way out. A window, a root cellar, something. The front door slammed open. Crawford stood there, gun drawn. "Mrs. Sullivan?" He smiled that snake smile. "I think we need to talk." Billy pressed against Maggie's side. She pushed him behind her. "Leave us alone." "I'm afraid I can't do that. See, your husband owed a lot of money to some very important people. People who don't like being cheated. When Patrick died, they expected his wife to make good. Instead, she ran. I didn't know about the debt. I didn't know anything." "Doesn't matter." Crawford stepped closer. "The debt exists. Someone has to pay it. If not in money, then—" His eyes slid to Billy. "In other ways." Maggie's blood ran cold. "Don't you touch him. I have no interest in the boy. But the county home is always looking for healthy children, strong boys who can work the farms." "No." "Then pay the debt. Simple as that." "I don't have $2,000. I don't have anything." "Everyone has something, Mrs. Sullivan. It's just a matter of finding it." Behind Crawford through the open door, Maggie saw Joe. He was on his feet, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, and he had a rifle. Crawford's rifle, she realized. He'd taken it from one of the fallen men. Joe raised the gun. Crawford! The banker spun. Joe fired. The shot went wide intentionally, Maggie realized. It shattered the window beside Crawford's head, showering him with glass. "Next one goes through your skull," Joe said. "Drop the gun." Crawford hesitated. "I said drop it." The gun clattered to the floor. "Now get out. Take your men and get out. And if I ever see you on my property again, I won't miss." Crawford's face twisted with rage. "This isn't over, Callahan. The bank doesn't forget. The bank doesn't forgive." "Neither do I. Now move." Crawford moved. He backed out of the cabin, hands raised, eyes never leaving Joe's face. Outside, his men were already retreating, one clutching his wounded shoulder, the other helping him onto a horse. Joe followed them out, rifle steady. Maggie watched through the shattered window as they rode away into the darkness. Then Joe lowered the gun. His shoulders slumped, and he collapsed. "Joe." Maggie ran to him, Billy right behind. Joe was on his knees in the snow, breathing hard, one hand pressed to his side. Blood seeped between his fingers. "Joe, you're hurt." "Just a graze." His voice was strained. "Bullet caught me. It's nothing." "Let me see." "Maggie, let me see." She pulled his hand away. The wound was more than a graze, a deep furrow along his ribs, bleeding freely. "We have to get you inside. Billy, help me." Together they got Joe to his feet. He leaned heavily on Maggie, his weight almost buckling her bad leg. They stumbled into the cabin. Maggie guided him to the bed. Her bed now, she realized, and eased him down. Billy ran for the medical kit Joe kept in the chest by the fire. "This is going to hurt," Maggie said, pressing a clean cloth to the wound. "Already does." "Then it'll hurt more." She cleaned the wound as best she could, stitched it closed with the needle and thread from the kit. Joe bore it in silence, jaw-clenched, eyes fixed on the ceiling. When she finished, she sat back. "Why did you do that? Do what?" "Risk your life. For us." Joe turned his head to look at her. His face was pale, drawn with pain. "Because you're worth it," he said quietly. "More than you know." Her own words thrown back at her. Maggie felt tears burning in her eyes. "They'll come back," she whispered. "Crawford, the bank, they won't give up." "No, they won't." "So what do we do?" Joe reached out, took her hand. "We fight," he said. "Together." Billy climbed onto the bed beside them, small face fierce with determination. "I'll fight too," he said. "I'm not scared." Joe smiled, a real smile despite the pain. "I know you're not, son. You're the bravest kid I ever met." "Braver than you. Way braver." Billy grinned, and Maggie realized something. They weren't just three strangers anymore. They were something more, something that felt against all odds like family. Outside, the wind picked up. Another storm was coming, but inside the cabin, three people held on to each other and refused to let go. Joe's fever started on the second night. Maggie woke to the sound of thrashing, found him tangled in the blankets, skin burning hot, muttering words that made no sense. She pressed a cold cloth to his forehead and held his hand through the worst of it. "Sarah," he mumbled. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I should have been there. I should have—" "Shh." Maggie stroked his hair. "You're safe. You're here." "The fire. I can smell the fire. Emma. Emma." "Joe, wake up. It's a dream. Just a dream." His eyes flew open. Wild. Unfocused. Then they found her face. "Maggie." "I'm here." He grabbed her wrist. "Don't leave." "I won't." "Promise me." "I promise." His grip loosened, his eyes closed. He didn't let go of her hand. Billy found them like that in the morning. Maggie asleep in the chair beside the bed, her hand still clasped in Joe's. He didn't say anything, just went to start the fire. 7 years old, and already he understood things that shouldn't need understanding. The fever broke on the third day. Joe woke clear-eyed, weak but lucid. He tried to sit up immediately. "Don't." Maggie pushed him back down. "You'll tear the stitches." "Crawford hasn't come back. It's been 3 days." 3 days. Joe struggled against her hands. "That's too long. He's planning something. Or he's given up." "Men like Crawford don't give up. They regroup." Joe caught her wrists, held them still. "Maggie, listen to me. He'll come back. And when he does, he won't be alone. He'll have the law on his side. Papers, warrants, maybe a sheriff. Then what do? We need proof." "Proof of what?" "That the debt ain't legal. That Patrick was tricked into signing something he didn't understand. That the bank's been doing this to other people." Joe's jaw tightened. "Crawford ain't working alone. This is bigger than one widow and $2,000. "How do you know?" "Because I've seen it before. Banks out here, they prey on farmers, make loans they know can't be repaid. Then they take the land, sell it to the railroad companies for 10 times what it's worth." He met her eyes. "Your husband wasn't the first. He won't be the last." Maggie's mind raced. "Patrick kept papers. Ledgers. I thought they burned with the farm, but what? He had a hiding place. A loose stone in the fireplace. He didn't think I knew, but I saw him once putting something inside." "Where's the fireplace now?" "Gone. The bank burned the farmhouse after they took everything. Said it was unsafe." Her voice cracked. "I watched it burn. Billy did too." Joe was quiet for a moment. "Is there anyone else who might have seen those papers? A neighbor? A friend?" "There was a man, Silas Morton. He and Patrick used to drink together. Patrick trusted him." "Where's Morton now?" "I don't know. He left town after Patrick died. People said—" Maggie stopped. "Said what?" "They said he owed money too, to the same bank." Joe's eyes sharpened. "We need to find him. He could be anywhere. Then we start looking." He tried to rise again. This time Maggie didn't stop him. She helped instead. Billy came running when he heard Joe moving around. "Joe, you're okay." "Takes more than a bullet to keep me down, son." "Mama said you almost died." "Your mama exaggerates." "I heard her crying." Joe looked at Maggie. She looked away, face flushed. "Well," Joe said quietly, "I ain't dead, and I ain't planning on dying anytime soon. Promise." "I don't make promises." I know. You don't make promises you can't keep." Billy crossed his arms. "But you could try." Joe knelt slowly, painfully, until he was at Billy's level. "All right, I promise I'll try." "Try hard, yeah. The hardest." Billy threw his arms around Joe's neck, and Joe held him, like he'd never let go. They made a plan. Joe would ride to Helena to search for Silas Morton. Maggie and Billy would stay at the cabin. It was too dangerous to travel together, too easy to spot. Joe would leave his rifle, show Maggie how to use it. "I don't like this," Maggie said as Joe saddled Molly. "Neither do I. But we ain't got a choice." "What if Crawford comes back while you're gone?" "He won't. He'll wait for legal authority. That takes time." "You don't know that." "No, but I know you." Joe turned to face her. "You're the strongest woman I ever met, Maggie Sullivan. You walked 5 miles through a blizzard with a busted leg. You kept your son alive when everything was falling apart. You can handle 3 days alone." "It's not me I'm worried about." "Then don't worry about me either. I've survived worse." "Have you?" He didn't answer that. Instead, he pulled something from his pocket. A small leather pouch worn soft with age. "This was Sarah's," he said. "Her grandmother's ring is inside. She wanted Emma to have it someday." He pressed it into Maggie's hand. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen. If something happens, I want you to have it. Sell it if you need to. Use the money to get Billy somewhere safe. Joe, promise me. Maggie's eyes burned. I promise. He mounted Molly, looked down at her one last time. I'll be back in 3 days, 4 at most. I'll be here. I know you will. He rode away without looking back. Maggie watched until he disappeared over the ridge. Then she went inside, sat at the table and cried. Billy found her there an hour later. Mama, are you sad? She wiped her eyes quickly. Just worried, sweetheart. About Joe? Yes. Billy climbed into her lap, something he hadn't done in months. He'll come back. How do you know? Because he promised to try hard. And Joe keeps his promises. Maggie held her son close. When did you get so smart? I learned from you. She laughed through her tears. Come on, she said. Let's make dinner. The first day passed slowly. Maggie kept busy mending clothes, preparing food, teaching Billy his letters with a stick of charcoal in the back of Joe's ledger. The rifle sat by the door, loaded and ready. She checked it every hour. On the second day, someone came. Maggie heard the hoofbeats before she saw the rider. She grabbed the rifle, pushed Billy toward the back of the cabin. Stay down. Don't move. Mama. Billy, do as I say. She cracked the door, rifle raised. It wasn't Crawford. It was a woman. She sat on a gray mare wearing a heavy wool coat and a determined expression. Middle-aged, weathered, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Sullivan. Maggie didn't lower the rifle. Who's asking? My name's Clara Whitfield. I run the boarding house in Miller's Creek. She held up her hands. I ain't armed, and I ain't with the bank. Then why are you here? Because I heard what happened, what Crawford did. Clara's jaw tightened. And because you ain't the first woman he's come after. Maggie's arms trembled. What do you mean? Can I come in? It's cold out here, and what I got to say is gonna take a while. Maggie hesitated. Then she stepped aside. Clara dismounted, tied her horse to the post, and walked inside like she owned the place. She nodded at Billy, still hiding behind the bed. That your boy? Yes. Good-looking kid. Got his father's hair, I'm guessing. How do you know about his father? Clara sat at the table, pulled off her gloves. I knew Patrick Sullivan. Not well, but well enough. He stayed at my boarding house a few times when he came to town for supplies. Maggie sat across from her, rifle across her lap. I didn't know that. There's a lot you didn't know, I'm guessing. Patrick was a good man, but he kept secrets. Most men do. What kind of secrets? Clara's eyes met hers. The kind that get people killed. Maggie's blood chilled. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the bank, about Crawford, about what really happened to your husband. He died in a mine collapse. Did he? That's what everyone said. Everyone says a lot of things, doesn't make them true. Clara leaned forward. I've been watching Crawford for 2 years now, ever since he came after my sister. Your sister, Ruth. Her husband owed money too. When he couldn't pay, Crawford came calling. Made the same threats he made to you. Take the farm or take the children. Clara's voice hardened. Ruth paid. Sold everything she had. Thought she was free. But she wasn't. Crawford came back 6 months later. Said there was more debt. Interest, he called it. Fees. Penalties. Numbers that didn't add up. What happened to her? She died. Clara's face was stone. Walked into the river one morning and didn't walk out. Maggie's hand flew to her mouth. Crawford killed her. Not with his hands, but he might as well have. He broke her down piece by piece until there was nothing left. Billy made a small sound from behind the bed. Maggie turned to him. Sweetheart, why don't you go check on the horses? But Mama. Please, Billy. The boy looked between them, then slipped out the back door. When he was gone, Maggie turned back to Clara. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you can stop him. You and that cowboy of yours." "How?" "By finding the proof, the real papers, the original contracts." Clara reached into her coat, pulled out a folded document. "I found this in Ruth's things after she died. She'd hidden it. Didn't trust anyone, not even me." She slid it across the table. Maggie unfolded it with shaking hands. It was a loan agreement, but the numbers were wrong, crossed out and rewritten in a different hand. The signature at the bottom looked strange, awkward. "This was forged," Maggie whispered. "Now you're catching on." "But this is just one document. It doesn't prove—" "It proves the bank's been altering contracts, changing the terms after people sign. That's fraud, Mrs. Sullivan. That's prison time." Clara's eyes gleamed. "But I need more. I need every contract Crawford's ever touched. And the only man who might know where they are is Silas Morton." Maggie's heart stopped. Silas. He worked for Crawford, before he ran. Worked for him. As a collector. Crawford hired men to intimidate people who couldn't pay. Morton was one of them. Clara's voice softened. But he couldn't stomach it. Not after he saw what happened to Ruth. He ran, took what documents he could. Crawford's been hunting him ever since. Joe's looking for him. Right now. I know. That's why I'm here. Clara stood. "When your cowboy finds Morton, he needs to bring him to me. I've got a lawyer in Helena who'll take the case. A good one. But we need Morton's testimony. We need those papers. And if Crawford finds him first—" Clara didn't answer. She didn't have to. Joe found Silas Morton in a mining camp outside Helena. The man was half dead, starving, sick, hunted. He'd been running for 8 months, moving from camp to camp, never staying more than a few days. "They're gonna kill me," Morton said, huddled in the corner of a filthy tent. "Crawford, his men, they find me, I'm dead. Not if you help me. Help you how I'm a dead man walking." Joe crouched in front of him. "You worked for Crawford. You saw what he did." "I did more than see. I helped." Morton's eyes were hollow. "I'm the one who convinced Patrick Sullivan to sign that loan. Told him it was the only way to save his farm. I watched him put his mark on a paper that was going to ruin his life." "Did you know what Crawford was planning?" "Not at first. Thought it was just business. Hard business, but business." Morton's voice cracked. "Then I saw him change the contracts. Add zeros, alter terms, forge signatures. By the time I figured it out, I was in too deep." "So you ran." "What else could I do? I got no money, no friends, no future. Crawford owns half the territory. He's got judges, sheriffs, politicians in his pocket." Morton laughed bitterly. "I'm just one man. What can I do against that?" "You can testify." Morton went white. "Are you crazy?" "I know a lawyer in Helena. A good one. He'll take the case if you come forward. And Crawford will have me killed before I ever reach the courthouse." "Not if I'm protecting you." Morton stared at him. "Who are you, mister? Why do you care?" Joe thought about Maggie, about Billy, about Sarah and Emma, and all the years he'd spent running from the past. "Because someone I care about is in trouble," he said, "and because men like Crawford have been winning for too long." Morton was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached under his bedroll and pulled out a leather satchel. "I took these when I left. Every contract I could get my hands on. Names, dates, amounts. Proof of everything Crawford's done." Joe took the satchel. It was heavy. "This is enough to put him away." "It's enough to put him away forever, if we can get it to the right people." "Then let's go." They rode through the night. Joe pushed hard, ignoring the pain in his side. Morton wasn't much of a rider, but fear kept him in the saddle. Every shadow made him flinch. Every sound made him reach for the gun Joe had given him. "We're being followed," Morton said around midnight. Joe had known for an hour. 2 riders, maybe 3. Crawford's men. Probably. What do we do? Keep riding. They reached the cabin at dawn. Maggie was waiting on the porch rifle in hand. Her face flooded with relief when she saw Joe, then tensed when she saw the stranger. Who's this? Silas Morton. He's got the proof we need. Morton dismounted, stumbling with exhaustion. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm sorry. For everything. Maggie's eyes hardened. You worked for Crawford. I did. And I hate myself for it every day. Sorry doesn't bring my husband back. No, ma'am, it doesn't. Morton's voice broke. But maybe I can make sure no one else loses theirs. Billy appeared in the doorway. Joe, you came back? Told you I would, son. The boy launched himself off the porch and into Joe's arms. Joe held him tight, breathing in the smell of wood smoke and soap. Missed you, Billy mumbled into his shoulder. Missed you too. Maggie watched them. Something in her face softened. Get inside, she said. All of you. We've got a lot to talk about. They gathered around the table Joe, Maggie Morton, and Clara Whitfield, who'd stayed at the cabin after learning Joe was due back. Billy sat on the bed, whittling and listening with ears too sharp for his age. Morton spread the documents on the table. Contracts, ledgers, letters, a paper trail of corruption stretching back years. This is everything, Clara asked. Everything I could take without being noticed. Morton pointed to a stack of contracts. These are the originals. See the numbers? They don't match the copies Crawford filed with the county. He changed them. Every single one. Added interest, extended terms, doubled principal. By the time people realized what happened, they'd already lost everything. Maggie picked up one of the contracts. Her face went pale. This is Patrick's signature. Yes, ma'am. But these numbers, he never would have agreed to this. He didn't. Crawford changed them after he signed. Morton's voice was barely a whisper. Your husband wasn't stupid, Mrs. Sullivan. He was cheated. Maggie's hands shook. Joe moved to stand beside her. Didn't touch her. Just stood there. What about the mine collapse? She asked. Was that Crawford too? Morton hesitated. Tell her, Joe said quietly. I don't know for certain, but... Morton swallowed hard. But Crawford was pushing Patrick to sign over the farm. Patrick kept refusing, said he'd rather die than give up his land. And then he died. A week later, in a mine he wasn't even supposed to be working. Maggie sat down heavily. He killed my husband. I don't know. He killed my husband. No one argued. Clara gathered the documents carefully. This is enough, more than enough. But we need to move fast. Crawford knows Morton's been found. He'll come for him. Let him come, Joe said. Joe. I said let him come. I'm done running, done hiding. If Crawford wants a fight, I'll give him one. This isn't your fight. The hell it isn't. Joe's voice was fierce. Maggie and Billy are my family now. Anyone comes after them, they come through me first. Silence fell over the room. Maggie looked at Joe. Really looked like she was seeing him for the first time. Family, she said softly. If you'll have me. She didn't answer with words. She crossed the room and kissed him. Billy whooped from the bed. Clara cleared her throat. Morton looked away. When they broke apart, Maggie was crying. I'll have you, she whispered. I'll have you forever. They had 12 hours. 12 hours before Crawford arrived with 6 men and a warrant for Maggie's arrest. Clara left at midday, the documents hidden in her saddlebag. She'd ride hard for Helena, get them to the lawyer, file the papers with the territorial court. Stay safe, she told Maggie, and stay strong. I will. I mean it. Crawford's going to try to break you. Don't let him. I won't. Clara rode away. Morton wanted to run. Joe wouldn't let him. You leave now. Crawford's men will catch you before you get 5 miles. And if I stay, then you testify. You tell the truth. And you let me handle the rest. You're 1 man against 6. I've faced worse odds. Have you? Joe didn't answer. He was too busy loading his rifle. They came at dusk. 6 riders led by Crawford kicking up snow as they thundered toward the cabin. Behind them came a man in a black coat with a silver star on his chest, a sheriff. Joe stepped onto the porch. That's far enough. Crawford pulled up his horse. Callahan, I was hoping you'd be reasonable. I'm very reasonable. Turn around and go home. Can't do that. Crawford nodded toward the sheriff. Got a warrant, legal and proper, for Margaret Sullivan wanted for fraud and theft. That warrant's based on lies. The contracts were forged. Says who? Says the evidence, which is already on its way to the territorial court. Crawford's face flickered. Just for a moment. Just enough. What evidence? Every contract you ever altered, every signature you ever forged, every farmer you ever cheated. Joe smiled coldly. It's over, Crawford. By this time tomorrow, you'll be the one with a warrant on his head. Crawford's mask slipped. Rage twisted his features. You think you've won? You think some papers are going to stop me? He gestured to his men. Burn it down. Crawford. The sheriff stepped forward. We can't just... I said burn it down. The men hesitated. Joe raised his rifle. First man who strikes a match dies. Your choice. One of the men reached for his gun. Joe fired. The man screamed, clutching his hand. His gun fell to the snow. Anyone else? Nobody moved. Crawford, Joe said quietly. I'm going to say this once. Leave. Take your men and your fake sheriff and your lies and leave. Because if you don't, I will put a bullet in your skull and bury you where no one will ever find you. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Something in Joe's voice must have convinced him. Crawford wheeled his horse. This isn't over. No, Joe agreed. It isn't. But when it's over, you'll be in prison, and I'll be right here living the life you tried to destroy. Crawford spat on the ground. Then he rode away. His men followed. The sheriff lingered for a moment, looking between Joe and the retreating riders. Then he nodded once and followed the others. Joe lowered his rifle. His hands were shaking. Maggie came out onto the porch. Billy clung to her side. Is it over? Billy asked. Not yet, Joe said. But soon. Did you really mean it? Maggie asked. What you said about being family. Joe turned to face her. I meant every word. Even the part about forever. Especially that part. Billy tugged at Joe's sleeve. Does this mean you're gonna be my pa? Joe's throat tightened. He knelt down, looked the boy in the eye. If your mama says yes. Billy whirled to Maggie. Mama, say yes. Maggie's eyes were bright with tears. Yes, she whispered. Yes. Billy threw his arms around both of them. And standing there on the porch with the sun setting and the snow glowing gold, 3 broken people became whole. But the real test was yet to come, because Crawford wasn't finished, and the darkness he brought with him was older and deeper than any of them knew. 3 days passed without word from Clara. Maggie paced the cabin floor until Joe grabbed her hands and made her stop. You're gonna wear a hole through the boards. Something's wrong. She should have reached Helena by now. Roads are bad. Snow's been falling all week. What if Crawford caught her? What if he got the documents? Then we fight without them. How? Joe didn't have an answer. Morton sat in the corner whittling nervously. He'd barely spoken since Crawford's retreat, jumping at every sound, flinching whenever someone moved too fast. He's planning something, Morton said suddenly. Crawford. He doesn't just give up. He plans. He waits. Then he strikes. Let him strike, Joe said. We'll be ready. You don't understand. Crawford's got connections, money, power. He could have an army here by morning if he wanted. Then why hasn't he? Morton's hands stilled. I don't know. And that scares me more than anything. Billy tugged at Maggie's sleeve. Mama is the bad man coming back. Maggie knelt beside him. I don't know, sweetheart. Joe won't let him hurt us, right? Right. Promise. Maggie looked at Joe. He nodded once. I promise. On the fourth morning, Clara returned. But she wasn't alone. Maggie heard the horses first, not 2 or 3, but a dozen or more. She grabbed the rifle, heart pounding. Joe! He was already at the window. It's Clara, he said slowly. And she's got company. They stepped onto the porch together. Clara rode at the head of a group of riders, men and women, farmers and townsfolk, all armed, all grim-faced. Behind her came a man in a formal black coat carrying a leather case. Mrs. Sullivan, Clara called out. Meet Daniel Hartley, best lawyer in the territory. Hartley dismounted. He was younger than Maggie expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a sharper jaw. Mrs. Sullivan. He tipped his hat. I've reviewed the documents. What Crawford did to you and your husband, it's not just fraud. It's conspiracy. Racketeering. Possibly murder. Murder. The mine collapse that killed Patrick Sullivan. I've found evidence suggesting it wasn't an accident. Maggie's legs gave out. Joe caught her before she hit the ground. Easy, I've got you. He murdered Patrick. Crawford murdered my husband. We don't know that for certain yet, Hartley said carefully. But we have enough to bring charges. Enough to freeze his assets. Enough to put him in front of a judge. When? Tomorrow, Helena Courthouse, 9 in the morning. Tomorrow. Morton stepped forward, face pale. That's not enough time. Crawford will find out. He'll come for us before we ever reach the courthouse. That's why we're not going alone. Clara gestured to the riders behind her. Every person here has been hurt by Crawford. Every one of them has lost something, a farm, a business, a family member. They're ready to testify, and they're ready to fight. Maggie looked at the faces surrounding her. An old man with weathered hands, a young woman clutching a baby, a middle-aged couple both armed with shotguns, a boy not much older than Billy, sitting tall on a plow horse, all of them looking at her, all of them waiting. Why me? Maggie whispered. Why am I the one they're following? Because you survived, Clara said simply. Because you didn't give up. Because when Crawford came for you, you fought back. She dismounted, walked to Maggie's side. These people have been waiting for someone to show them it was possible. Someone to prove that Crawford isn't invincible. I'm not a leader. You are now. They rode out at dawn. 15 riders plus Maggie and Billy in a wagon driven by Joe. The snow had stopped, but the cold bit deep, turning breath to fog and fingers to ice. Billy huddled under blankets pressed against Maggie's side. Mama, are we gonna win? I hope so, sweetheart. What if we don't? Maggie pulled him closer. Then we'll figure something out. We always do. Joe glanced back at them. His face was set determined, but Maggie saw the worry in his eyes. They stopped at midday to rest the horses. Hartley pulled Joe aside. We need to talk about your testimony. My testimony. You witnessed Crawford's assault on the Sullivan property. You saw his men. You heard his threats. I did. And you were married before, to a woman named Sarah Callahan. Joe went rigid. What's that got to do with anything? Crawford's lawyers will try to discredit you. They'll dig into your past, find anything they can use. My wife and daughter died 7 years ago, in a fire. I know, and I'm sorry. Hartley's voice softened. But there were rumors afterward that the fire wasn't accidental, that you might have been involved. I wasn't. I believe you, but the judge might not. If Crawford's people bring it up, then I'll tell the truth, same as I always do. The truth isn't always enough, Mr. Callahan. It's all I've got. Hartley studied him for a long moment. You love her, don't you, Mrs. Sullivan? Joe didn't answer. He didn't have to. They reached Helena as the sun was setting. The city sprawled across the valley's smoke, rising from 100 chimneys. Hartley led them to a boarding house on the edge of town where rooms had been prepared. "Get some sleep," he told them. "Tomorrow's going to be long." Nobody slept. Maggie lay in the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Billy's breathing beside her. Her mind raced through everything that could go wrong. Crawford's lawyers would tear her apart. They'd call her a liar, a thief, a woman who couldn't control her husband's debts. They'd twist the truth until nobody knew what was real anymore. A knock at the door. Maggie's heart jumped. "It's me!" Joe's voice. She opened the door. He stood in the hallway, hat in hand, looking more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Me neither." "Can I come in?" She stepped aside. Joe sat in the chair by the window. Maggie sat on the edge of the bed. Between them, Billy slept on, oblivious. "I need to tell you something," Joe said quietly. "About Sarah." He nodded. "The fire that killed them. It wasn't just a robbery gone wrong." His voice was barely audible. "The man who did it, I found him, 2 years after, in a mining camp in Colorado." Maggie's breath caught. "What happened?" "I killed him." The words hung in the air. He was drunk, bragging to anyone who'd listen about the things he'd done, the people he'd hurt. Joe's hands clenched. He said their names, Sarah, Emma. Said he could still hear them screaming. "Joe, I beat him to death with my bare hands, left his body in a ditch and rode away, never told anyone." Tears streamed down Maggie's face. "I don't regret it," Joe said. "Not for a second. But if Crawford's people find out, if they use it against me in court, they won't. You don't know that. I don't care." Maggie crossed the room, knelt in front of him. "You did what any father would do, any husband. You got justice for your family. I got revenge. That ain't the same thing. Maybe not, but I don't blame you, and I don't love you any less." Joe's eyes glistened. "How can you say that, after everything I just told you?" "Because I know who you are, not who you were, not what you did. Who you are, right now, here." She took his hands. "You're a good man, Joe Callahan. The best man I've ever known." "I ain't?" "You are. And tomorrow, we're gonna walk into that courthouse together, and we're gonna fight, and we're gonna win. And if we don't, then we'll still have each other, and that's enough." Joe pulled her into his arms. They held each other until dawn. The courthouse stood at the center of Helena brick and stone, with columns that reached toward a gray sky. People lined the streets. Word had spread about the trial, about Crawford, about the widow who dared to fight back. Maggie walked up the steps with Billy on one side and Joe on the other. Behind them came Morton Clara and the rest of the witnesses. Crawford was already inside. He sat at the defense table, flanked by 2 lawyers in expensive suits. His face was calm, confident, like he'd already won. "Mrs. Sullivan." The judge was an older man, stern-faced, with spectacles perched on his nose. "You're charging Mr. Crawford with fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder. These are serious accusations." "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you have evidence to support them?" "We do, Your Honor." Hartley stood. "If it please the court, we'd like to present documents obtained from the First Montana Bank. Documents showing systematic fraud spanning more than 5 years." He spread the papers on the judge's bench. Crawford's lawyers objected. The judge overruled them. One by one, the documents were entered into evidence. Contracts altered after signing. Interest rates doubled. Signatures forged. A paper trail of corruption that led straight to Crawford. "These could be fabricated," Crawford's lawyer said. "We have no proof. We have witnesses." Hartley gestured to Morton. "Mr. Morton worked for Crawford for 3 years. He can testify to the authenticity of every document." Morton stood. His hands shook, but his voice was steady. "Everything they're showing you is real. I was there when Crawford changed those contracts. I watched him do it, over and over. And why should we believe you? Crawford's lawyer sneered. You're a fugitive, a criminal. I'm a man trying to make things right. By lying. By telling the truth. Morton's voice cracked. I did terrible things. I helped Crawford destroy people's lives. And I'll carry that guilt until the day I die. But I won't let him destroy anyone else. Not Maggie Sullivan. Not her boy. Not anyone. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel. Order! Order in the court! Crawford leaned back in his chair, still smiling, like he knew something no one else did. The trial continued for hours. Witness after witness took the stand. Farmers who'd lost their land, widows who'd lost their husbands, children who'd lost their families. Each story more devastating than the last. Maggie listened heartbreaking. All these people, all this pain, and Crawford just sat there smiling. When it was her turn to testify, Maggie's legs trembled. Joe squeezed her hand. You can do this. What if I can't? You can. I believe in you. She walked to the witness stand. Crawford's lawyer circled her like a vulture. Mrs. Sullivan, your husband borrowed $2,000 from the bank. Is that correct? Yes. And he failed to repay it. He died before he could. How convenient. Objection. Hartley was on his feet. Sustained. Watch yourself, counselor. The lawyer smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Let me rephrase. Your husband died owing a substantial debt, and rather than honor that debt, you fled. I fled because Crawford threatened to take my son. He threatened to follow the law. He threatened to burn down a man's cabin with us inside. Do you have proof of that? I have Joe Callahan. He was there. Ah, yes, Mr. Callahan. The lawyer turned to face the gallery. The man who's been harboring you for weeks. The man who, by his own admission, killed another man 7 years ago. The courtroom gasped. Maggie's blood turned to ice. How do you know that Mr. Crawford is a thorough man, Mrs. Sullivan? He knows everything about the people who threaten him. The lawyer's smile widened. Including the fact that your protector is a murderer. He's not. He beat a man to death with his bare hands, left the body in a ditch, never reported it to anyone. The lawyer spread his hands. Is this really the man you want vouching for your character? Joe stood up. I did what I had to do. You committed murder, Mr. Callahan. I got justice for my family. You took the law into your own hands. Because the law wasn't doing anything. Joe's voice thundered through the courtroom. That man killed my wife and daughter. He burned them alive, and nobody lifted a finger to stop him. So yeah, I stopped him myself, and I'd do it again. Silence. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Callahan, you're admitting to murder in my courtroom? I'm admitting to killing the man who murdered my family. You can call it whatever you want. Crawford stood. Your Honor, I think it's clear that the prosecution's witnesses are unreliable. We have a confessed murderer, a fugitive criminal, and a desperate widow who'll say anything to escape her debts. I move for dismissal. The judge hesitated. Maggie's heart stopped. They were losing. After everything they'd been through, after all the evidence, all the testimony, they were losing. Your Honor. A new voice. Everyone turned. A woman stood at the back of the courtroom. Middle-aged, well-dressed, with a face that had once been beautiful, but was now lined with grief. Who are you? The judge demanded. My name is Elizabeth Crawford. The woman walked forward, each step deliberate. I'm Edward Crawford's wife. Crawford's face went white. Elizabeth, what are you? Quiet, Edward. She didn't look at him. I've been quiet for 20 years. It's my turn to talk. She reached the front of the courtroom. Everything they've said about my husband is true. The fraud, the forgery, the threats. Her voice was steady. I've watched him destroy families, ruin lives, I've seen the documents. I've heard him brag about it. Elizabeth, I said, quiet. She whirled on him. You think I don't know what you did to Patrick Sullivan? You think I don't know about the mine? Crawford lunged toward her. Joe moved faster. He caught Crawford by the collar, slammed him against the table. Touch her, and I'll break every bone in your body. Guards rushed forward. The judge hammered his gavel. Order, order! Elizabeth kept talking. My husband paid men to sabotage that mine. He wanted Patrick Sullivan dead because Patrick was the only one who knew the truth. The only one who could prove what Edward had done. Tears streamed down her face. I have letters, documents, everything. I've kept them hidden for years, hoping I'd never have to use them. Why now? The judge asked. Why come forward now? Elizabeth looked at Maggie. Because she did what I never could. She fought back. Her voice broke. I was a coward. I let my husband hurt people because I was afraid of him. But I'm not afraid anymore. She pulled a bundle of papers from her coat. Here. Everything you need. Every crime he's ever committed. Every life he's ever destroyed. She laid them on the judge's bench. Crawford screamed, a wordless sound of rage and terror, and Maggie knew. They'd won. The verdict came 2 hours later. Guilty. On all counts. Crawford was dragged from the courtroom in chains, still screaming about lawyers and appeals and revenge. Nobody listened. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. Billy ran to Maggie, throwing his arms around her waist. Did we win, Mama? Did we really win? We really won, sweetheart. Does that mean we're safe now? Maggie looked at Joe. He nodded. Yeah, she said softly. We're safe. Clara approached, eyes red with tears. You did it. You actually did it. We did it. All of us. Ruth would be proud. Clara's voice cracked. So proud. They embraced. Morton stood apart, uncertain. Maggie went to him. Thank you. I don't deserve thanks. After what I did, you made it right. That's what matters. Is it enough? Maggie considered. It's a start. Joe found her as the crowd was dispersing. So, he said. What now? Now. Maggie smiled. Now we go home. Home. I like the sound of that. The cabin's gonna need work. Bigger. More rooms. Why more rooms? Maggie's smile widened. Because families need space to grow. Joe stared at her. Are you saying? I'm saying maybe. Someday. She took his hand. But first, we have a wedding to plan. A wedding. You did ask me to be your family. I'm holding you to that. I didn't? Joe stopped, laughed. All right, a wedding it is. Billy appeared between them. Does this mean Joe's gonna be my pa now for real? Joe knelt down. Only if you want me to be. I want you to be. Billy threw his arms around Joe's neck. I want you to be more than anything. Joe held him tight, and over the boy's shoulder he looked at Maggie. She was crying, smiling and crying. Let's go home, she whispered. They walked to the wagon together, Joe and Maggie and Billy. A family, broken and mended and stronger than before. Behind them, the courthouse stood silent. Ahead of them, the road stretched toward the mountains. And somewhere in the distance, spring was waiting. The road back to the cabin felt different. Maggie sat in the wagon, Billy asleep against her shoulder, watching the mountains grow closer with every mile. The same road she'd nearly died on weeks ago. The same snow, the same cold. But nothing was the same. Joe rode beside them on Molly, his eyes scanning the horizon out of habit. Even with Crawford in chains, even with the verdict delivered, he couldn't quite let go of the vigilance that had kept them alive. You can relax now, Maggie called to him. Old habits, bad habits. Joe almost smiled. Maybe. They reached the cabin at sunset. Billy woke when the wagon stopped rubbing his eyes. Are we home? Home. The word struck Maggie like a blow to the chest. Yeah, sweetheart, we're home. Joe helped them down from the wagon. His hands lingered on Maggie's waist longer than necessary. I should check on the animals. They can wait. Maggie, they can wait. She took his hand. Come inside. All of us. Together. The cabin was cold. The fire had been out for days, but within an hour, warmth had returned. Flames crackled in the hearth. Coffee steamed on the stove. Billy sat at the table drawing pictures with the charcoal Joe had given him weeks ago. What are you making? Maggie asked. Our family. Billy held up the paper. 3 figures stood in front of a small cabin, smoke curling from the chimney. See? That's you, Mama? That's Joe. And that's me. Maggie's eyes burned. It's beautiful. Can we hang it up? So everyone can see? Everyone who comes to visit. Clara, Mr. Morton, the lawyer man. Billy's face grew serious. We're going to have visitors now, right? Because we're not hiding anymore. Joe crouched beside the boy. That's right. No more hiding. And we're going to stay here forever. Long as you want. I want forever. Billy threw his arms around Joe's neck. I want forever and ever. Joe held him tight. Over the boy's shoulder, his eyes found Maggie's. Forever, they seemed to say. She nodded. Forever. The next weeks passed in a blur of work and laughter. Joe expanded the cabin, adding a room for Billy, reinforcing the walls against the winter winds. Maggie planted the seeds of a garden in boxes near the window, dreaming of spring vegetables. Billy followed Joe everywhere, learning to chop wood, to tend horses, to read the weather in the clouds. You're good at this, Joe told him one afternoon. Being a rancher. Really, natural talent. Billy's chest puffed with pride. Can I have my own horse someday? Someday, when you're big enough. When's that? When your legs stop dangling off Molly's sides. Billy looked at his legs, frowned. That's gonna take forever. Good things usually do. Clara visited twice that week. The first time she brought news. Crawford's trial had made the territorial papers. People were talking. Other victims were coming forward. The bank's finished, she said. Board of directors resigned. Federal investigators are coming from Washington. And Crawford, 20 years in the territorial prison, maybe more if the murder charges stick. Maggie exhaled. It's really over. It's really over. Clara squeezed her hand. You did this, Maggie. You and Joe. You brought down a monster. We had help. You had courage. Everything else followed. The second time Clara visited, she brought a dress. For the wedding, she said, laying it across the bed. It was Ruth's. She never got to wear it. But I think she'd want you to have it. The dress was simple but beautiful. White cotton, hand-stitched with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Maggie touched it with trembling fingers. I can't accept this. You can and you will. Clara's eyes glistened. Ruth believed in love. Real love. The kind that survives everything. She never found it herself, but she always hoped. Her voice broke. She always hoped someone would. Maggie pulled her into a hug. Thank you. Just be happy. That's all the thanks I need. The wedding was set for the first Sunday of March. Word spread through Miller's Creek and beyond. People Maggie had never met offered to help, bringing food-lending chairs, stringing ribbons between the trees near the cabin. Why are they doing this? Maggie asked Joe. They don't even know us. They know what we did, what we stood for. Joe shrugged. People need hope. We gave them some. We're not heroes. We're not villains either. Sometimes that's enough. The night before the wedding, Maggie couldn't sleep. She stood at the window watching the stars, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't quiet. Having second thoughts. Joe's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him standing in the doorway, hair mussed from sleep. Not about you. Never about you. Then what? Maggie hesitated. Do you think Patrick would approve? Joe was quiet for a moment. I didn't know him, but from what you've told me, he loved you. He'd want you to be happy. Even with another man. Even with another man. Joe crossed to her, took her hands. Maggie, listen to me. Loving someone new doesn't mean forgetting someone old. The heart's not a bank account. You don't have to withdraw from one to deposit in another. She laughed despite herself. That's surprisingly poetic for a rancher. I have my moments. You really do. She kissed him then, soft and slow and full of promise. I love you, Joe Callahan. I love you too, Maggie Sullivan. He smiled. Soon to be Maggie Callahan. Maggie Callahan. She tested the name. I like the sound of that. So do I. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cold. Billy burst into Maggie's room before sunrise, vibrating with excitement. Mama, wake up, it's the day. I'm awake, sweetheart. Are you nervous? I'd be nervous. Joe's nervous. I saw him pacing outside. Joe's pacing. Back and forth, like a horse that wants to run but can't find the gate. Maggie laughed. Go tell him I'm coming. Already? Well, not to the wedding, but I need to talk to him. You're not supposed to see each other before the wedding, Clara said. Clara said a lot of things. Go. Billy ran off. Maggie found Joe behind the cabin exactly as Billy had described, pacing, muttering to himself. Having second thoughts? He spun around. Maggie, you're not supposed to... I know what I'm not supposed to do. She walked toward him. But I needed to see you. Why? Because I have something to give you. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the leather pouch he'd given her weeks ago. You said this was Sarah's, that you wanted Billy to have it someday. Maggie, I want you to have it back. I gave it to you. I know. And now I'm giving it to you. Because I don't need it. She pressed it into his hands. I don't need a ring to know you'll protect me. I don't need gold to know you love me. I just need you, Joe. That's all I've ever needed. Joe stared at the pouch, then at her. I don't deserve you. Probably not. She smiled. But you've got me anyway. He kissed her. Soft at first, then deeper, pulling her close like she might disappear. I'm gonna spend the rest of my life making you happy, he whispered against her lips. You already do. Then I'll do it more. That's not possible. Watch me. The ceremony took place at noon. Half the territory seemed to be there. Farmers and ranchers, shopkeepers and miners, women in their Sunday best, and children running between legs. Clara stood as witness. Morton, newly pardoned, served as best man. Billy walked Maggie down the makeshift aisle, his small hand gripping hers. You okay, Mama? I'm perfect, sweetheart. You look like an angel. You're biased. What's biased mean? It means you love me too much to be objective. Is that bad? No, baby. Her voice caught. That's the best thing in the world. Joe waited at the end of the aisle. He wore his cleanest shirt, his newest coat, his hat held against his chest. His hair was combed, his beard trimmed, his boots shined to a mirror finish. But his eyes were what made Maggie's breath stop. They were full of love, pure and simple and overwhelming. She had never seen anything so beautiful. The preacher was a young man from Miller's Creek, nervous but sincere. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Josiah Callahan and Margaret Sullivan. Maggie barely heard the words. She was too busy looking at Joe, at the man who had saved her life, who had given her a home, who had become against all odds the love she thought she'd never find again. Do you, Josiah, take Margaret to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Joe's voice was steady. I do. And do you, Margaret, take Josiah to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Maggie's eyes blurred with tears. I do. Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The preacher smiled. You may kiss the bride. Joe pulled her close. The kiss was everything a wedding kiss should be, tender and passionate and full of promise. The crowd erupted in cheers. Billy threw himself at them both, nearly knocking them over. We're a family. We're really a family. Joe lifted him up, one arm around Maggie, the other holding the boy. Yes, son, we really are. The celebration lasted well into the evening. People danced and ate and told stories. Children chased each other through the snow. Old men argued about cattle prices and the coming spring. Maggie moved through it all in a daze of happiness. She talked to Clara about planting, to Morton about his plans to start over in California, to the young preacher about his hopes for a church in Miller's Creek. But she kept looking for Joe, and every time she found him, he was looking for her too. Mrs. Callahan. She turned. A woman stood behind her, older, elegant, with tired eyes and a familiar face. Elizabeth Crawford. Maggie's happiness chilled. Mrs. Crawford? Please, call me Elizabeth. She twisted her hands together. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see today. What are you doing here? I came to apologize. Elizabeth's voice trembled. What my husband did to you, to your family, to all those people I knew. I knew, and I did nothing. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to hear it. And because... Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. Because I need to say it. I need someone to know how sorry I am. Maggie studied her. This woman had been married to a monster, had lived with him, slept beside him, watched him destroy lives. But she had also been the one to end it, to stand up in that courtroom and tell the truth. What will you do now? Maggie asked. Start over. Somewhere far away. Somewhere no one knows my name. Elizabeth wiped her eyes. I have nothing left. Edward the bank took everything when he was convicted. The house, the money, all of it. Good. Elizabeth flinched. I deserve that. Yes, you do. Maggie paused. But you also deserve a second chance. Everyone does. Even me. Even you. Elizabeth stared at her. How can you say that? After everything? Because hatred is heavy. I've carried enough of it. Maggie straightened. I'm putting it down now, all of it, and walking forward. You're a better woman than I am. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of being angry. Elizabeth nodded slowly. I hope you find everything you're looking for, Mrs. Callahan, you and your family. I already have. Elizabeth left. Maggie watched her go. Then she went to find her husband. Joe stood at the edge of the gathering, watching the celebration with quiet contentment. Maggie slipped her hand into his. There you are. Here I am. Having fun. More than I've had in years. He squeezed her fingers. You. The best day of my life. Even better than when Billy was born. Different, but equal. She leaned against his shoulder. I saw Elizabeth Crawford. Joe tensed. What did she want? To apologize. And I forgave her. Joe turned to look at her. Just like that. Just like that. Maggie met his eyes. Life's too short for grudges, Joe. We both know that better than anyone. You're a remarkable woman, Maggie Callahan. I'm a tired woman who wants to dance with her husband. I don't dance. You do tonight. Maggie, Joe Callahan, I just married you. The least you can do is shuffle around in a circle with me. He laughed, a real full laugh that made his whole face transform. All right, 1 dance. 2. 1. 3. You're impossible. You love it. I do. He pulled her toward the dancers. God help me, I do. They danced until the stars came out. Slowly the guests drifted away. Wagons rolled down the road. Horses disappeared into the darkness. Until only 3 remained. Maggie, Joe, Billy. They sat on the porch together, wrapped in blankets, watching the last embers of the celebration die. Mama. Yes, sweetheart. Can I call Joe Pa now? Joe went still beside her. That's up to Joe, Maggie said carefully. Billy turned to face him. Can I? Please, I've been practicing. Practicing. In my head. Pa, Pa. See, I'm good at it. Joe's throat worked. You don't have to call me that, son. I know I'm not. You're my pa. Billy's voice was fierce. I don't care about blood and stuff. You're my pa because you saved us. Because you love Mama. Because you taught me to whittle and ride and be brave. His eyes glistened. That's what a pa does. Right. Joe couldn't speak. Maggie watched tears stream down his face. Right, Billy pressed. That's what a pa does. Yeah. Joe's voice cracked. That's what a pa does. So can I call you Pa? You can call me anything you want, son. Joe pulled the boy into his arms. Anything in the whole world. Pa, Billy hugged him back. I love you, Pa. I love you too, Billy. Joe held him tighter. More than you'll ever know. Maggie wrapped her arms around them both. 3 broken people, 1 whole family. Later that night, after Billy had fallen asleep, Maggie and Joe sat by the fire. What are you thinking? She asked. About tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days after that. Worried? No, just grateful. He stared into the flames. For years I thought my life was over. Thought I'd just exist until I stopped existing. Then you and Billy showed up half-frozen desperate, and everything changed. We showed up. That's a nice way of putting it. You did, right when I needed you most. I think we needed each other. Maybe. Joe took her hand. Maggie, I need to tell you something. More confessions. Something I should have said earlier. He turned to face her. After Sarah and Emma died, I made a promise to never love anyone again, to never let anyone close enough to hurt me. And you broke that promise. You and Billy. You crashed into my life and tore down every wall I'd built. His voice roughened. And I'm glad. I'm so damn glad. Joe, I spent 7 years punishing myself for something that wasn't my fault. 7 years living like a ghost. And then you appeared and suddenly I wanted to live again. Really live. Maggie cupped his face in her hands. Then live, Joe Callahan. Live loud and messy and full. That's all I ask. With you. Always with me. He kissed her, deep and slow and full of everything words couldn't say. When they broke apart, they were both crying. No more ghosts, Maggie whispered. No more ghosts. Joe agreed. Just us. Just our family. Just us. They held each other by the fire, and for the first time in years, the future felt bright. Spring came early that year. The snow melted. The streams thawed. Green shoots pushed through the brown earth, reaching for the sun. Billy grew 3 inches in 2 months. He learned to read, to write his name, to ride Molly without falling off. Joe expanded the ranch, buying land from the dissolved Crawford estate at auction. Cattle filled the pastures. A second horse joined Molly in the stable. Maggie planted her garden, tomatoes, beans, corn, flowers along the fence because beauty mattered too. And in June, she told Joe the news. "I'm pregnant." He dropped the axe he was holding. "What?" "Pregnant, with child, having a baby." She laughed at his expression. "You look like you've seen a ghost." How? Do I really need to explain how? No, I mean, Joe ran his hands through his hair. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." "When?" "December, the doctor thinks. Maybe January." "A baby." Joe sat down heavily on the chopping block. "We're having a baby." "We're having a baby." He looked up at her. "Are you happy?" "Joe Callahan, I have never been happier in my entire life." He stood, crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. "I love you." "I know. I'm gonna say it every day, every single day until we're old and gray and can't remember our own names." "That's a lot of I love yous." "Not enough, never enough." Billy came running around the corner of the cabin. "What's going on? Why is Pa crying?" "He's not crying, he's just—" "I'm crying." Joe laughed, wiping his eyes. "Happy tears, son, the happiest tears." "Why?" Maggie knelt down. "How would you feel about being a big brother?" Billy's eyes went wide. "A brother, I'm gonna have a brother. Or a sister." "A brother or a sister." Billy jumped up and down. When? Winter, around Christmas. That's forever away. It'll come faster than you think." Billy threw his arms around Maggie's waist. "I'm gonna be the best big brother ever. I'm gonna teach them to whittle and ride and read. I'm gonna protect them from bad guys. I'm gonna—" "Slow down, sweetheart. One thing at a time." "But I have so many plans." Joe laughed again. "He gets that from you. He gets that from Patrick." They both went quiet for a moment. Then Joe nodded. "Patrick would be proud of him. Of both of you." "I hope so. I know so." Maggie leaned into him. "Thank you, Joe." "For what?" "For everything. For saving us. For loving us. For giving us a home." "You gave me more than I gave you." "Impossible." "True." He kissed the top of her head. "You gave me a reason to keep living, Maggie. That's worth more than any home." Summer turned to fall. Fall turned to winter. And on the coldest night of December, in the same cabin where it all began, Maggie Callahan gave birth to a daughter. They named her Emma. Emma Ruth Callahan. After the daughter Joe had lost and the sister Clara still mourned. "She's beautiful," Billy whispered, staring at the tiny bundle in Maggie's arms. "She looks like you," Joe said, his voice thick. "She looks like all of us." Maggie traced the baby's cheek with one finger. "Our family. Together at last." Outside, snow fell soft and silent. Inside, a fire crackled. And in that small cabin in the Montana wilderness, 4 people held on to each other. A rancher who had learned to love again. A widow who had learned to trust again. A boy who had learned to hope again. And a baby who would grow up knowing nothing but love. 1 year ago, Maggie Sullivan had collapsed in the snow, certain she was going to die. 1 year ago, a broken cowboy had found her and carried her to safety. 1 year ago, 2 strangers had met by chance on a frozen road. Now they were family. Not by blood, not by law, but by something stronger than both. By choice, by courage, by love. Maggie looked at Joe, at Billy, at the baby sleeping in her arms. "We made it," she whispered. "We made it," Joe agreed. "What do we do now?" Joe smiled. "Now we live, Maggie. We live." And they did. Through hard winters and warm summers. Through struggles and triumphs. Through everything life could throw at them. They lived. Together. Always together. Because that's what families do. They hold on. They fight. They love. and they never ever let go. The road that had once led Maggie to despair now led somewhere else entirely. It led home. And home, she had learned, wasn't a place. It was the people who loved you. It was the arms that held you. It was the hearts that beat alongside yours. Home was Joe. Home was Billy. Home was Emma. Home was a cabin in the mountains where three broken people had found each other and made each other whole. That was the truth Maggie Sullivan Callahan carried with her for the rest of her days. Love doesn't save you from the storm. It gives you someone to weather it with. And that, in the end, makes all the difference.